I just realised how badly I need a wee, but I just sat down. Happy Friday! Welcome back to Drinking by My Shelf. My name is Emma and this is Balancing the Books. And by the way, did you notice my brand new intro animation that just appeared? That was designed by Leora from Books with Leo. I will link to her channel and all of her socials below. She is just the best person to work with. I cannot recommend her highly enough. She designed my channel header and profile picture back in the spring, and now she has made me that intro animation you just saw, plus an end screen, plus all Instagram templates. I'm like a whole new channel. It's very exciting. Seriously, for all of your design and animation needs, call Leora, she's the best. Okay, let's play Balancing the Books. I really wish I'd washed my hair before doing this. I can't stop staring at myself in the viewfinder and being repulsed. So in case you're new here and you do not know, Balancing the Books is the game where I add up everything that I hauled this month, balance it with everything that I read this month, or DNF'd, or unhauled, or otherwise got out of my life, and I try and make those books balance so that I don't become a book hoarder. That's the game, but am I very good at playing it? That's another question. If you watched last month's Balancing the Books and were confused, you are not alone. When I was editing it, I could not work out what I was doing, why I was going through the books in that order. It was very back and forth. So hopefully I've tidied it up and streamlined the process a little bit now. Wow, my floor needs a hoover. Get your head in the game, Emma. Okay, to my right, is it going to fit in the shot? Nope. Is my book trolley, which is piled full of all of the books that I own and haven't read yet. Get out of my way. So the aim of the game is to reduce the number of books on there. And at the beginning of this month, or at the beginning of September, I had 44 books on that trolley. So now let's see the damage that I did during September. I went on a little bit of a book buying binge because September was hard, and it turns out I didn't feel like reading, I felt like buying books, which may work against me in this particular game. So let's see. The first book I bought was Pages for Her by Sylvia Brownrigg. If you did watch last month's very confusing Balancing the Books, you will see that I read the first book that this is the sequel to, which is called Pages for You, and I loved it, like really fell in love with the characters, and I decided I really wanted to read the sequel. And I told a story that I'm going to tell again, just in case you weren't there, of how I used to own this book. I owned this book first, I got given it as a present, but I was like, oh, I haven't read the first in the series, so I gave it away. And then, this is like 2.5 years later, I finally read the first in the series, loved it, and then had to buy this back myself. Ridiculous. Pages for You was about a young girl. She's like a teenager, maybe she's like 19. She goes off to college and she falls in love with a slightly older woman who is a grad student there, and the book is about the like rise and fall of their love affair, like the passion of it all starting and then it slowly falling apart. And I found it absolutely heart-wrenching and like went on every step of that journey with them. This is set years in the future. I think they're both married to men now, and it's about them reconnecting in the future, and I cannot wait. So that's +1 to the pile. Then I hauled a book on my Kindle which was called Boy Parts by Eliza Clark, but do not fear, I read it, so it doesn't add to the mess. And what to say about this book? I hated it with every fibre of my being, and yet I think it's a very good book. I don't want to give it a negative review. I read it for my book club. The book club was very split between people who loved it and hated it. And whenever I heard the people who loved it talk about it, I felt like I agreed more with them. I was relating more to what they were saying. However, my feelings were not with them. My feelings were like wanting to claw out the parts of my brain that had read this book because I hated it so much. And it's not because it was a bad book, it's just because I am so squeamish. So it was gory. It had lots of descriptions of being sick in it, and I'm like very emetophobic and I do not like that. So I didn't enjoy that. That was literally like page 1. I started reading it and was like, oh no, this is not the book for me. And a lot of my friends who were in the book club with me were a little bit further ahead, so I kept getting texts being like, oh no, this book is not Emma friendly. And I was like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? And yeah, it was lots of sick, lots of blood, lots of gore, just not my thing at all. However, I did think it was really clever, and it's a book that I've kept thinking about, and even though while I was reading it I was hating the experience, and when I finished it I was so glad to have finished it so I didn't have to read it anymore. And I even, in the book club, some people said that they hated it but they're glad that they read it, and I was like, I'm not even glad that I read it. Like, I wish I hadn't read it because it disturbed me so much. And yet now, with a bit of distance, I am glad I read it. I do think it's an interesting book that has like lingered with me and not solely in an unpleasant way. I haven't told you what it's about. What is Boy Parts about? It's a good question. It's not a simple answer. Boy Parts is about this girl called, literally already can't remember, and she is, as my friend was explaining, who she like knows a lot more about anime than I do, she is like very much inspired by anime female characters. So she's this like ridiculously gorgeous, good-looking, sexual, red-headed woman who's like kind of terrifying, and she hurts men. So she's a photographer and she invites men back to take like sexy pictures, and she will like physically hurt them. And she finds this constant frustration of the men never seem scared of her. They always find it sexy. And so apparently, if you know more about anime, I'm not going to explain this well because I don't know about anime, but apparently it is like quite clever and is really, really referencing a lot of things that come up a lot in anime and manga. So apparently it is kind of a trope, I guess, that they have these very, very sexualized female characters who are very strong and have weapons, and they can kill people, but they're only ever portrayed as that being a sexy thing. And then this real life woman who's doing this stuff and like genuinely really physically hurting these men, and finding this frustration of like, how much do I have to hurt you for you to be afraid of me? Why aren't you being afraid? Why are you still so turned on? That's kind of where it starts, but it just gets like darker and darker and darker and darker. The next book that I hauled was If I Had Your Face by Frances Cha, and I haven't read this one yet, so it goes on the pile. This one I definitely will read in October though, because it was the book that my Patreons voted for me to read. Every month, if you are one of my white wine tier or above Patreons, I post a poll asking what you guys want me to read, and this month, instead of doing a poll with options, I just was like, go nuts, tell me what to read. And this was like the comment that got the most votes. People wanted me to read this one. So I'm really excited. I reached out to the publisher who sent me this copy. It's such a gorgeous cover. It's set in South Korea, and it's about 4 different women living in this world where plastic surgery is so commonplace. It looks so beautiful, but all of the descriptions are like really dark. Hopefully not quite as dark as Boy Parts, but let's see if I can cope. Then I hauled another book on my Kindle, which was Meet Cute Club, but I already started and DNF'd it, so we are safe from that one. This one was a shame. So I barely ever read romance, as you may have noticed, but I came across this one when I was researching for a book break video, and the description just sounded so cute that I was like, maybe this is a romance that I will fall in love with. So I bought it and read it because I really wanted to love it. It is a cute sounding story. So it's about these 2 guys. One of them runs a romance book club and he absolutely loves romance books. The other one works in the bookshop and isn't into romance, but he joins the romance book club as like a way of spending more time with the other guy, but he always teases him for liking romance. So at first they're kind of enemies, and then they're gonna fall in love, and it sounds really, really cute. And I was hoping that it would just be like the right story. The fact that it's about books, like set in a bookshop, I thought that might be enough to hook me in to a genre that I'm not usually in love with, but it just didn't. Not because it was bad at all. I'm sure if you're a big romance reader, then you could absolutely love it. It just like wasn't for me, so I DNF'd it. However, talking of romance, I did then read a further 2 romance books this month, and that is because I did the LoveHate book challenge with my bestie Emma Tobias. So I'll link to that video if you haven't seen it already. It was so much fun. Basically what we did is we each sent each other 2 books, 2 movies, and 2 songs that fit under the romance bracket. I kind of stretched the limits of that. I didn't have any romance recommendations for Emma, so I just did like vaguely love themed. But we had to pick from each media format. We picked one that we loved and one that we hated. And then we had to read the other person's choices, watch the movies, listen to the songs, and guess which was the love and which was the hate. And I won't tell you if we got it right, you'll have to watch the video, but it was really fun. So from that, I ended up reading 2 romance books that Emma suggested. One of them was Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey, and the other was Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating by Christina Lauren. I won't tell you which was the right way round for Emma, but I will tell you my answers. I hated Fix Her Up and loved Josh and Hazel. Well, I didn't hate Fix Her Up. It was fine. It was perfectly readable. But if I hadn't been reading it for the challenge, I definitely would have DNF'd because I did not connect to either of the main characters at all. So Fix Her Up is about a girl called Georgie who's like 23, and her whole life she's been in love with her older brother's friend, who then went on to become like a famous baseball player. But then he had an injury and couldn't play anymore, and he's come back to their hometown and is like super depressed and like not doing anything with his life. So she kind of goes and cheers him up, and they end up striking a deal where he wants to get a job as a commentator, but he's like not considered network friendly because he was always like sleeping around so much, and she wants to be taken more seriously by her family. And for some reason they both think that fake dating will help both of them. I understand how fake dating will help his image because it looks like he has a serious girlfriend and he's like settled down. I don't understand why Georgie would think that like dating her brother's friend is the best way to get taken seriously by her family. Maybe it is, whatever. But Georgie was just like, she was so innocent and naive as a character that I just couldn't relate to her at all. And Travis, I think that was his name, who's the guy, was just like, I mean, if you watch my video, I was very taken aback by his sexual language. I suddenly felt very prudish, which is not something I feel very often. I'm usually like very open to hear whatever, no judgment. But reading the sex scenes in that book, I was like, oh my god, ew, 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 stop. So I did not like that one. Whereas Josh and Hazel was just so much fun. Hazel was such a brilliant character. She is completely chaotic, but very much in a real person way. She felt like she was really subverting the manic pixie dream girl trope by being a real human who refused to exist just to like add flavour to her boyfriend's life. She actually reminded me a lot, I'm going off piece now, but I recently rewatched the TV show Hindsight, which is a TV show, I've seen it twice now and I absolutely love it, and they cancelled it after season 1. And it's so frustrating because it finishes on a cliffhanger. And also it was so good, I don't know why they cancelled it. It's about a girl who, on the morning of her wedding, she's not sure if she wants to go through it or not, and she ends up going back in time to the 90s. To the morning of her first wedding, which we know in present day that marriage didn't work out, and she gets a chance to like do her whole life differently the second time around. And anyway, the reason I'm mentioning it is because her best friend is called Lolly, and reminded me of Hazel in that I really liked how the show treated Lolly. Not in terms of the things that happen to her, she has like a lot of bad luck, but when you first meet her, she's like so chaotic and she could so easily just be the eccentric best friend. But actually the show gives her a very real storyline and character arc of her own, and I really liked that. That was irrelevant. The point is, Josh and Hazel was a really fun book. Fix Her Up less so, but I read them both, so they are both out of my sight. Then I hauled Anxious People, and this was thanks to you guys, because quite a few of you have commented on videos recently asking me if I've got it yet, and I had totally, like, it had fallen off my radar. I forgot this was coming out. So thanks so much for reminding me. I again reached out to the publisher and asked for this one, and they sent it to me, and I am so excited. So this is a new book by Fredrik Backman, who is the author of one of my all-time favourite books in the world, Beartown. This one sounds funny, so this is called Anxious People, and it's about one bank robber, 7 strangers, and a really bad idea. This one gives me Jonas Jonasson vibes, the 100-year-old man who climbed out the window and disappeared. Mainly just because that's another Swedish comedy, but they both sound kind of equally absurd, and I'm really excited to read this one. At this point in the video, my camera stopped recording, and I didn't notice for ages. And by the time I noticed, I guessed where I thought it might have stopped and got it totally wrong and missed out like a chunk of this. So just to summarise, I think the next thing that I show you is that I hauled 3 books from my Trash My TBR video. I will link to that video below. Trash My TBR is a video that I do pretty regularly where I show you books that I'm excited about on my TBR and ask you to trash them so I don't have to waste my time reading books that aren't good. So I did that. I showed you guys 10 books in that video. You trashed a bunch of them. I ended up buying 3, and then basically most of what my camera wasn't recording was just me going back and forth as to whether or not to show you which books I bought or keep it as a surprise until the next video. So really it's a good thing that the camera didn't really capture that waffling back and forth. And then I think it's going to cut back in a second when I decide to give you a clue. What I'll do instead is give you clues. So I bought 3 books. One of them you guys said was really boring, so I bought it because I love boring books. One of them you guys said had really unlikable characters, so I bought it because I love unlikable characters. And then the third one is a bit more complicated. So you guys trashed it a lot in the comments. If you haven't watched Trash My TBR, it's basically just a video where I ask you actively to only say bad things about books, because it's all of the books I put in there are already books I'm really, really excited about, so I don't need any more positive comments, I just ask for negative ones. So you guys aced it. This bottom book here got loads of negative comments, like the most of any of the books in that video, so I was going to trash it, but then I made the mistake of going over to Goodreads and seeing quite how highly rated it is and all of these wonderful things that you guys obviously didn't say because I told you not to, and I panicked and I just couldn't bring myself to trash it right there and then, and so the rules are that I have to either delete it from Goodreads or buy it, so I bought it. I don't know if I'm going to like it at all. And then, final one that I hauled is Before the Coffee Gets Cold, Tales from the Cafe. And this is the sequel to Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. So I've read this one twice now. I absolutely loved it both times. It's a 5-star read for me. I have talked about it non-stop. It's about a time-travelling cafe, and I love time travel in books. And it's really quirky, and it made me cry, and I so rarely cry actual tears from books, but I did cry reading this book. So yeah, I've read it twice, absolutely loved it, been so excited for number 2, and finally I got it, Tales from the Cafe, and I just finished it last night, and I really, really loved it. I think number 1 will always have that special place in my heart at the top, but this was everything that I could have hoped for in the sequel. So you get a brand new cast of characters. The staff at the cafe are still there, but we're 7 years on, so some of them have changed and been replaced. And then in terms of the clients or customers who come to the cafe to time travel, it's a brand new cast of characters with their own really sad and sweet and moving reasons for time travelling. I think this one was less heartbreaking. The reasons in the first book why people time travel are so hard to bear. It's so emotional, whereas these ones I think were generally sweeter. Still really, really emotional, still tear-jerking stuff, but I managed to keep my tears in my face because it wasn't quite so sad. So there you go, lovely little series. Look how gorgeous they are together. And they're really short and really easy to read. 2 little books I can imagine myself reading over and over again. So here's the problem. From all of that, I added 6 books to the book trolley. And so to balance the books, I now need to get rid of 6 books. So let's see how many I already got rid of. First up, right at the beginning of the month, if you watched the very first video that I posted in September, it was a Cluedo game. Look for RG in the thumbnail, he did it with me. It was like a murder mystery little game that we played. And one of the challenges I had to do was unhaul a book that I hadn't read. And so I chose to unhaul a book called Precious You, which I had like an unbound proof of it. It was like a really, really early review copy that I'd picked up at a book event. Oh, I remember going to events in real life. Feels like another world. But it's now, that book is now out in the world. It's been published. And so I just kept not picking it up because maybe it's super shallow, but I like to read books that feel like books, or read on my Kindle or audiobook or anything. But there's something about reading it when it's just paper that wasn't appealing to me because it's big. It's A4. It would have been awkward to carry around. So I got rid of that one. So that's 1 down. I read a few stories from this collection, Stories of Your Life by Chiang, and then I decided to give this book to RG because I think he will get on better with it. It is sci-fi, and I think the problem was I was reading this at the same time as another sci-fi book, which we'll get to in a second, and I'm not a big sci-fi person, so it's just too much sci-fi in one go. But Chiang is a really beautiful writer, and a couple of months ago, back over the summer, I read the story from here, which is called The Story of Your Life, and that is the story that the movie Arrival was based on. And I enjoyed reading that story, but it might have been because I'd just seen the movie and then read the story, so I kind of knew what was happening. Whereas ever since then, whenever I've tried to read a story from this collection, I've just really struggled to understand what's happening because, I don't know, my brain's not tuned in to reading sci-fi. So I gave a few stories a go, but then I decided to give this one to RG instead. And then literally the only book that I read that had pre-existed on my book trolley was this one. This is another short story collection, You Know You Want This, by Kristen Roupenian. She is the author who wrote Cat Person, which was that story that went viral a few years ago. I absolutely loved Cat Person. And I had quite mixed results, I think, with the rest of this collection. So the other thing I should have said about the Chiang is not only do I not love sci-fi, I also don't love short stories. So this was always going to be a stretch for me. In this one, I still suffered from it being short stories. These stories were really, really dark in a really fun way, They had very unique, gripping premises. They had great openings. So usually with short stories, I don't like starting the story because starting a book is always kind of the worst part of reading a book. And with short stories, you have to do it over and over again. In this one, it was unusual. I loved starting every story because they had such strong openings, but most of them just fizzled out at the end in ways that I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what I was supposed to take from it. I didn't even know what I was supposed to be feeling. The very first story in here, which is called Bad Boy, I think, ends in such a disturbing way. Yeah, it's called Bad Boy. It ends in such a disturbing way that I just put the book down and walked out of the room and was like, nope, not reading that. But then I came back in. I read this all in one go, by the way, last night. I literally finished Tales from the Cafe and then knew that I had to film Balancing the Books today and was like, I need to read at least one more thing so that my score isn't ridiculous. And so I picked this up and read it start to finish. I'm going to say that my favourite story in here was Cat Person, which I had already read like 2 years ago. I also really liked a story in here called The Good Guy, which was the longest story in here and kind of the worst reviewed. Like, from looking at other people's reviews, a lot of people didn't like The Good Guy. It's about a guy who like thinks he's a nice guy, and I thought it was very layered, and I really fucking hated the guy in it so much. But I was like, I know that guy. I know guys like that, exactly like that. She's very good at writing humans and like real humans. The rest of the stories, other than those two, are much more horror. So those two are kind of weird, like misfits, in that their Cat Person is just entirely real life based. The Good Guy is basically entirely real life based. There's like a little hint at the end of something else. But then the other stories in here are all horror stories. And I was like so ready for that. That's why I was loving the openings. They were very dark, very creepy. I was really sucked in. But just like none of them managed to engage me the whole way through or give me anything to hold on to at the end. So it was fine. It was like meh, but at the same time, it was good. Like, these stories will stick with me because of the premises, but they weren't that great to read. So like, I don't not recommend it. Whatever. So that means that I only took 3 books off my trolley this month. There were 2 more books that I read, which I will mention quickly now, but spoiler alert, they don't help. So I reread The Farm by Joanne Ramos because this was this month's Patreon book club pick, and I loved it just as much. This was again a book that I gave 5 stars when I read it last year. Read it again for the book club, 5 stars all over again. I just think I liked it even more this time round because the first time I didn't think the ending was that great. I think I actually, now that I think about it, gave this 4 stars when I first read it because I loved it the whole way through and then didn't like the ending. Whereas this time I thought the ending was like pitch perfect. So good. So bleak. So perfect. Like, ugh. Did I just say perfect twice? I may have said perfect twice. If you don't know what this is about, it's a kind of dystopian book. It's set basically in our exact real world, except there is this company that exists called The Farm, that's its nickname, it's called Golden Oaks, where very, very rich clients can pay for surrogates, basically. So they're called hosts, these women who are chosen, basically, it's like, it gets very creepy very quickly, these women who are picked because they have no other options or because they're easily manipulatable. Anyway, I've said all of this before in videos last year where I talked about it as one of my favourites of the year, so I'll link to all of those, but it's great. And then finally, the only other book I haven't mentioned yet that I read is Player of Games by Iain M. Banks. So I hinted there was another sci-fi I read. This was that. You will find out more about that book very, very soon. I read this as part of another challenge. Why do I do so many challenges? This time, RG and I swapped books. We gave each other a book that we absolutely loved. I gave him Where the Crawdads Sing. He gave me Player of Games. And we read each other's books and vlogged it. And that video is coming out on Monday. So I'm not going to tell you too much about it because you will find out all about it on Monday. I think it's coming out on Monday. But that didn't help anything because that was a book that RG already owned. So he just lent it to me and then I read it and gave it back. So it didn't really have any effect on the number of books on my trolley. So let's see if I can bring this trolley back in. Here she is. Here's my baby. I still have 3 books that I need to get rid of. I haven't had to do this for ages. So far this year I've been really good at balancing the books just from reading them myself. I always hate when I have to just get rid of them. But it's fine, I'll go to good homes. The charity shop near us is open again now, so I can finally give these to a good place. Okay, well the first one I'm going to get rid of, it feels like such a waste, but this book is He Started It by Samantha Downing, and I just got this one. Like, look, it's a hardback. I was just given this one for my birthday, and so I hate the thought of getting rid of it, but I was given this by my mum for my birthday, and she then read it and then told me that it was terrible and that I shouldn't read it. So she was like, honestly, don't bother with it after all. So it feels like so wasteful to get rid of a present I was just given, but someone will be excited to see this on the shelf at the charity shop, and then they'll have to suffer through what apparently is a bad book. So is this a good deed or is this a bad deed? Unclear, but that one's going. Oh, I've picked it up again. I put it down face down and there's so many good quotes on the back. Are we sure it's not good? I've suddenly changed my mind a little bit. I'm going to keep this one right here while I see what else. Why did I invent this game? I don't want to play this game. I think I could get rid of this. So this is called Jack and Bet. I think this book will be absolutely lovely. It's about a married couple called Jack and Bet who have been together for 70 years, and it turns out that one of them has a secret, and they end up striking up an unlikely friendship with a young Romanian woman called Marinela, and it's about these like unlikely relationships. I bet it's delightful, but I also keep not being compelled to pick it up. So that one is one I'm happy to unhaul. Okay, 2 to go. I want my supper. What about this? This is The Woman in the Photograph. So this is a proof that Katie from Books and Things gave me ages ago. I really have no excuse. I should have read it. But again, it's long been out. This came out in July last year now. Again, I think it's a book that will be delightful. It's dual timeline, set in the 60s, about a young photographer who is a woman and not being taken seriously by her male colleagues. And then 50 years later, we are in, is that present day? Can I do that maths? Roughly present day. This photographer now leads this really reclusive life. She never had this massive career, but she did take one incredibly famous photograph, which now is the centrepiece of a new feminist exhibition. So again, I bet this will be a delightful book, but there is just like somehow not quite anything in it that's compelling me to pick it up. Unless I've just been looking at the back and I suddenly have this thought, what if this book is gay? Because if this book is gay, I'm going to keep it. Let's look on Goodreads. Why do books not advertise whether or not they're gay? No, I don't think it's gay. They're all saying friendship, which is great. I also love books about female friendship. So as I said, I think this book will be a delight, but it's a delight that someone else can read. I can't give this one to charity because it's a proof, and you're not allowed to sell proofs. So I will have to find a home for this one amongst my friends. Okay, 1 to go. Is it going to be this, or is it going to be something else? Oh, it could be this. I think I could get away with this because I know that Archie doesn't watch my videos because he never does. This is a book that he gave me. It wasn't like a present or anything adorable. It was just a book that he read and then he gave it to me and said I should read it. But I've like never wanted to. This is the book I think that has now been on this trolley for the longest. I've had this one for a few years. It's a non-fiction book about Chris Hadfield, who is an astronaut, and it's his lessons from space. And Archie said that it really like changed the way he viewed the world and like sounds like it had a really profound effect on him, and that is great, but I have never felt inclined to pick it up. And I feel bad because I'm always trying to get Archie to read books that I love, and he doesn't read as many books as I do, so it's like rarer when he recommends me a book, so I should read this. But I just like don't want to. I'm not a big non-fiction person at the best of times, and this isn't a non-fiction title that particularly excites me. So I think I'll get away with it because he doesn't watch these videos. I'm just going to very subtly put this one back on his shelf, and I don't think he will notice. So there you go, we did it! We balanced the books! You can get back out of my way now. The dream obviously is for that number to actually go down so that I have fewer and fewer books waiting to be read. So in October I'm going to try and read as many books as I possibly can, and I will stop buying books, which I think will be fine. September was just, I was feeling low, I bought a lot of books to feel better. October I feel like is going to be my month. I don't need to buy books, I'm just going to read books and do shit. Great. So that's it from me, that's it for balancing the books, but thank you for being with me on this journey. And now get ready for the amazing talents of Books with Leo once again. May I present to you my end screen.
I love you better today than yesterday. Every day is gonna play out the same.